I'm recording now, and let me share my screen. Can I hide the video panel? And let me hide floating meeting controls. Okay. All right. Do we need this? No. Okay, so this week we're moving into pandas. So let me just look at the overview real fast. So today we're starting with data wrangling, part 1, and next week we'll continue with data wrangling. I don't have a syllabus for this week. So as we go through script, as we go through the script this week, I've kind of outlined like what the different steps are. I can show you now just to like first thing that we're going to do today is concatenate some tables. So we have several tables with a similar structure. So we're going to concatenate them. We're going to kind of stack them into one big table. The second thing we're going to do is we'll probably spend most of the time recoding variables today. Recoding variables is one of the nastiest, most difficult kind of parts of data wrangling. And then at the end, after we've recoded some of these variables, then we'll play with aggregate functions. So we'll use the group by function and we'll aggregate. We'll do sums, we'll do averages, and I think we'll probably end there with these averages, and then or these aggregate functions. And then next week we'll have a second data set, and that's when we'll do joins. So next week will mostly be joins, like merging two tables together, or merging a table together with itself, disambiguation. And we'll do some more aggregate functions next week. So this week, I think really the emphasis is on the recoding and the kind of beginning of aggregate functions. Next week, we'll do joins, and then we'll keep doing more aggregate functions. Okay, and then that will pretty much be most of the data wrangling part for the second and third session. And then once we move into the fourth and fifth session, then we'll do visualization and some analysis, statistical analysis. So, okay, so let's start with the scripts. So I've already created a second script here, but what I recommend is, remember at the beginning of last class, we had to import Colab, from Drive. We had to import this Google Colab. We have to mount to Drive. We have to specify the path, right? So since this is always going to be at the top of the file, I think the easiest way to do this is just to copy your first script. So I'm gonna so I don't forget, I'm gonna rename this one. This is my prep script because you guys don't have a. Okay, so I'm just gonna rename this one to pandas, and this is today we're mostly gonna do we're mostly gonna do recoding and ag. So you can call it whatever you want, but this is a session 2 script. Okay, so I'm gonna open that up. you see all of our table of contents here, the Python tasks. Remember last week we did these like reading message, simple calculator, etc. Today we don't need any of that, right? The reason I copied and pasted the script is because I want what's in the libraries in IO. I want the OS, I want the pandas, I want this, right? I want these, the drive, or sorry, the path. But I don't need these tasks. So if you've used the headers like header 1, header 2, right, you can just collapse that whole section, right? So I just collapsed this Python task. You can tell that you can see that there are 29 cells hidden there. And if you push Control and select, it'll select the whole section, including those 29 cells, right? And I'm just going to delete it, right? I'm just going to delete that whole block because I don't need it. And also the second part here, okay, so this second part I will keep. It has some useful code. I'm gonna rename this. Let's see, do I need these? Maybe I'll just delete this too. All right, so you can push Control and select and then just delete it. Right, so now I basically just have this top libraries in IO, right? So I'm starting fresh with a new script, except I just saved that big block of stuff at the top that I'm going to need pretty much every script, right? Okay, so let's start by running this. I got to mount the drive, right? And this is going to mount the Google Drive where I've saved my data. I'm assuming that your data and your scripts and everything are in the same place as they were last time, right? So if you run this, it should this thing should pop up, the permission. Okay. Okay, and then we continue. Okay, and it ran everything. So I've mounted the Google Drive. Here's my path to the ministries. Here's I've listed the files in this folder. So this was in the data folder has all these files here, right? So the first thing I want to do, I want to look at these files. So if we just open up, say, the Ministry of Agriculture, you can see there are approximately 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 columns. So, okay, actually, I'm going to delete those and unzip this again, just because I did some stuff to mine that you haven't done to yours yet. I want to make sure we have the same data. Okay. So concatenating with Google Pandas, all right, so here I've got a fresh set of files. Right. So this first file here, KZ Ministries, just is kind of it's a master list of all the ministries. And it has, it has some attributes or data for the ministries. This is just kind of my master list. The actual data that I want are here in each ministry files. So I have Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Education, etc. So they're more or less the same file structure. They have all of the same column headers, but they might be different lengths. So and I deliberately pardon me. I deliberately added this ministry column, right? Even though this is the ministry, this whole file is the Ministry of Tourism and Sport, I still added this ministry column and put the Ministry of Tourism and Sport because I knew later that I'm going to take all of these files and put them into one big database, right? So if you add this kind of column in the beginning, you know, when you're going to, even though it's redundant, it seems redundant in this file because everything in this file is tourism and sport. But when you combine the data later, it'll be helpful, right? So, okay, so what I want to do is concatenate. So concatenating, if I just draw a little picture, do we know what concatenating is? Yeah. So I mean, we talk about concatenating strings, right? You can concatenate a string. For example, okay, so let's say you have, you know, a string. Oops, actually, I want to do that. So I'm going to concatenate ministry files or ministry data frames. So that's my first. So you can concatenate a string like, right? So this is called concatenating a string. You can concatenate a list. Right. But concatenating a data frame means, let's say, it means stacking the two data frames on top of each other. So, which is different than joining. So when you concatenate two data frames, the data frames need to have exactly the same columns, right? So if one data frame, let's open up two data frames. So let's open up Ministry of Labor here. Right. So to open up this data frame, I need pd.readExcel. Remember, pd is my alias for pandas, right? So I need pd.readExcel, and then I need the path to my data plus the name of the file in that folder, right? So this is the data folder, and then this is the file in that folder. And then if I run this, now I've got the Ministry of Labor, right? These 7 columns. Okay, so let's do this again with another one. Let's pick another ministry. Let's pick the Ministry of Finance. Call this one B. Okay, so here I've got the this is the Ministry of Finance data table. This is the Ministry of Labor data table, right? And they have the same columns. If I look at you can use the columns attribute, and right, so you can see that the columns for table A and the columns for table B are the same, right? So so then concatenating these means taking the data in table A and the data in table B and just stacking them in one long kind of making, extending them into one long list, right? Yeah.
What is after any other?
So right now I'm just looking at Ministry of Labor and Ministry of Finance. No. So I haven't concatenated them yet. Yeah. So to concatenate in pandas, you need to take, so let's create C, which is the new one. Actually, what I'll do is I'm going to take A, which is the original one. That's the Ministry of Labor. And I'm going to set it equal to pd.concat. Okay, now the function, the parameter for concatenate is actually a list. So I'm going to put in a list of data frames that I want to stack on top of each other. Okay. So this is all sometimes, I forget this and I just put in like A comma B and it's like, no, you need a list, right? It has to be a list. So here pd.concat, and then I'm going to make a list of A and B, right? So, I mean, I could just, I could save it. I'm going to resave this on top of A, right? So, okay, so now if I look at A, right, the columns are still going to be the same. But now the head, let me see. Right, now the top of A is the labor data, and the bottom of A is the finance data, right? So we've just taken the labor and the finance data and we just like stack them on top of each other, okay? So now you can see the shape of A. This will tell you the number of rows and the number of columns, right? So originally, the labor data had 14 rows and finance data had 14 rows, and now A has 28 rows because I've concatenated them. Okay, so that's fine if you just have two tables and you want to concatenate them, and form one table. But what if you have a file full of tables, right? Like you want to concatenate all of those, right? So let's write a function. We're gonna do a for loop over this list of files, right? And over that list of files, we're going to grab one file name, open it up, concatenate it to our main table, right? And then we're going to take another one, add that and concatenate that, and then concatenate that and concatenate that. So we're going to have one main database, and we're just going to keep adding and adding and adding and adding and adding until they're all added into one big data frame, okay?
This file is going to be connected to the main one, or to the previous one that was connected to the previous.
No, so this is not like, there's no concept of like linking here, right? We're not linking. All we're doing is we're just opening up a data set with maybe 10 or 15 rows, and we're just grabbing that data and we're going to add it to the bottom of a different table, right? And then we're going to take the data from the next table and just add that to the bottom of the next. It's kind of like appending a list, right? But you're appending rows, right, onto a data frame. Yeah. So let's start with
That changed the table itself, yep.
it depends. No. It's not changing the table itself. And in fact, like none of these tables have been changed yet, right? So the raw data are still these files. In pandas, I have A or B, and I've changed the structure of A, right? But A right now only exists in my Python code, right? And if I don't export, if I want to save that data structure, that new massive, the new big data frame, I have to export that back to my data folder. If I don't export that and I just turn off my computer, it goes away, right? Right now, it's only in memory in Python, right? And so, and I'm not changing my raw data at all. Nothing's happened to my raw data. Yeah. So, okay. So I'm going to go back through here. Let's just call this, I'm going to call this dat. Okay, so so that here now is, let me get rid of these. So dat is the Ministry of Labor data, right? And if we look at the shape of dat, it's the original 14 rows, right? Okay, now I'm gonna just delete this. Okay, so I want a file name list. I want a list of file names, right, of all the tables that I want to grab. So here's the list directory, right, for all the files in that folder. So I'm just going to copy and paste that list right there, right? Copy and paste it right here. So how did I get that? Remember, this is this os.list directory with my path to the data folder, right? So that actually just exports a list of file names. So I'm just going to copy and paste that list here. And I'm going to delete Ministry of Labor because I already have Ministry of Labor, right? That's the one I'm starting out with, dat. Right, so I'm going to delete that. And then I'm also going to delete this Kazakhstan ministries file because that has a different data structure, right? Different columns. That's kind of my master list. So I don't need that either, right? So, but everything else, Ministry of Trade, Ministry of Finance, National Economy, right? All of these are files. They all have the same structure. Yes. Yep. So so I'll maybe make a note here. Remove labor and KZ Ministries from the list. Okay, so now if I run that, now I just have the file name list, right? And this is just it's just a list of strings, right? These are just file names. These are not the files themselves. It's just the name of the file, right? Okay. Okay, so now let's make a for loop, right? For f in file name list. So I'm just going to grab each of those file names one at a time. And first thing I have to do is open up that file and create a new data frame for that file. So I'm going to call that new dat equals, and then to open up the file in pandas, it's pd.readExcel, right? Path data, because everything is in that data folder, and then f, right? Because f is the file name that I just grabbed out of that list. Okay. So let's just to make sure we know what we're doing, let's print out f.shape and f. And then I'll just run that. And that should just show us, oops. Sorry, new dat. New dat.shape. So new dat's going to be the data frame that has the data for that new file. And then f is just the name of that file. So if I print these out, we should see so I'm not concatenating anything yet, right? I'm just kind of opening up each file and checking out the shape. Okay. Do you see any issues, any potential problems? Okay. So each of the, so this is the row and the column, right? Row and column. So the different number of rows is not a problem. That's fine, right? Because I can take 3 rows and add them, and 10 rows and add them, and 5 rows and add them, right? What's the problem? The columns, right? So which ones are going to, yeah. So you can see in these last 3, they're not 7, right? So something's wrong with that data file when it's being opened up in pandas. All these other ones, it says, oh, these all have 7 columns, right? Which if we go and check, they're going to be the same column names because I copied and pasted the column names into every file, right? But Ministry of Internal Affairs has 13 columns. Ministry of Defense has 8 columns. Ministry of Agriculture has 8 columns. There's something wrong there. I don't think it's going to be a big problem, but let's go check, right? So let's go to the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Okay. So you can see what happened here. Here's column, the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. You can see that my research assistant with the URL or notes, she put the URL here and then she put the notes in another column, right? And then over here, the 13, you can see she put the URL here and then she put the note over here in this column. And that's why it's reading in 13 columns, because it thinks that this is like data, right? So what you need to do, what I'm going to do is I don't want to lose the note, right? I'm just going to copy and paste the note here. I'm going to copy this text and I'm going to add it. I'm going to go to the URL or notes and I'm just going to add it to that column, right? So now if you look at this column, there's the URL here and then there's the note here, right? And it's all in one column now. And I deleted it from that column. And so I'm just going to do this again, this Jana no Zen. I'll just copy that value and delete it. And then it needs to go at the end of this note. Fine. Right. So now the note's there, right? But it's in this 7th column. And now, like, nothing in these columns should be empty, right? I mean, it doesn't look empty because the URL is kind of running over, right? But if I click, can I do word wrap here? Text wrap. All right, so if I do text wrap, there's nothing else, after that. And just to be sure, what if they're like white spaces or something like that? I'm just gonna choose these columns, click and drag, and just delete these columns. Just to be sure there's no like white spaces or anything that I can't see, right? That's going to be interpreted as like a value. Okay, so I've done that. All I did here was like wrap the line. You can, play with that. Okay, so now, so this says it's safe to drive. So now if I go back here and I rerun this, so note, Ministry of Internal Affairs still says 13. What's wrong? If you do it, it might say 7. What's wrong? So what's that? So I ran it again. Yeah, I ran it again. Here, I'll run it again. I'll run it again. See what I'm looking for that 13 to change to a 7, right? So let's. It's still a 13. Okay. Notice that the ministry, I'm going to save this file. I'm going to, and I'm going to close it. The problem is, I'll close this one too. I don't need this. The problem is that sometimes when you change a file in Google Docs, it can take a minute to update. Oh, is there another one? Did I miss it? Okay, let me double check that. Maybe I missed one. Oh, see, my Ministry of Internal Affairs is 7 now. Yeah, so there are 2 notes. So one was in the 8th column, one was in the 13th column, and you have to. Okay. So this is the only thing I'm saying here is that sometimes Google Docs takes a second to update. And so it's best if you like save the file, close the file, give it a second, it operates, it's a little bit slower than like your main system, right? Because this has to be updated on the Google server, not on your local computer. Okay, so now the Ministry of Defense has 8, the Ministry of Agriculture has 8, so let's fix those ones. Defense. Right, same problem right here. You can see this reappointed. So I'm gonna move that to here. Okay, and just double check. Oh, that's gonna cause me a problem too. Right, so I'm gonna save this link as a second link here. Okay, now just to be clear, I'm gonna delete those columns. It says it's saved to drive. I'm gonna close the file. And let's see if it if it's ready. Oh, see, now this one, it's not even like recognizing the file. It's Ministry of Defense. I'm just opening and closing the file just to. Okay, so Ministry of Defense changed from an 8 to a 7, right? And lastly, we're going to do that for the Ministry of Agriculture. So usually when for this kind of data, I wasn't collecting it myself. I had my research assistant collect it. And so I gave her very specific instructions. Look at the bottom of the sheet here. I have minister, deputy minister notes, right? If there are any other notes, I said, put the notes randomly on this notes pad or this notes script so that when I grab the minister file, the data is like exactly clean and square, right? Because any little thing, like if you have like notes here, or sometimes people will put like notes at the bottom over here, right? Just like notes kind of randomly on the file. They think it's like a Word document, right? And that's going to cause you, it's going to add in extra rows or extra columns that you don't actually need or want, right? So where's my extra? Okay, there's my extra one. So let me copy that and move it. Oops, where was it? It was on row 6. Okay, so I'm gonna copy that, delete it, move it to here. Okay. So now my data is perfectly square, right? It has 7 columns. It says it's saved to drive. I'm gonna close this, run it, give it a second. Hopefully everything here is 7 columns now. Again, that file not found. It's not a problem with the code, it's a problem with Google Docs, or the Google Drive kind of updating. All right, great. So everything is 7 columns now, right? Okay. So, and remember, I still have my original DAT here, which is the Ministry of Labor one. So what I'm going to do is take the Ministry of Labor one, and then for each new DAT in that for loop, I'm going to concatenate that to DAT. Okay, so DAT is going to be updated with each new DAT. So here in the for loop for f in file name, I've got the new DAT. I've verified that, this is fine. So I'm actually going to comment that out right now. Or I can keep it, it doesn't matter. Okay, so DAT, I'm gonna update that as pd.concat, right? And I need the list now. And what's going to go in my list? Yeah, so DAT and new DAT. So this concatenate function, it's going to take whatever version, my latest version of DAT. It's going to add the data from new DAT onto the bottom of that. And then we're saving all of that as DAT again, right? So then we're just going to keep, DAT's going to get bigger and bigger, right? So let's, and we can see this here. I'm going to print DAT shape, right? So here for each file name, we open up the file, we verify, the number, the shape, the rows and columns, and the name of the file. Then we concatenate new DAT to DAT, and we save that over the old version of DAT, right? And then we're going to print DAT shape, and you'll see. So what's our original shape here? The original shape of DAT is 14, right? So if we run this now, you can see it went from 14 plus the 3 is now 17, right? And then 17 plus 14 is 31, 31 plus 18 is 49. So you can see DAT is just getting bigger and bigger, right? And so by the end, DAT has 207 rows, and that's everything, right? So now DAT has all the ministries, right? That is basically all of those files stacked together. It's still 7 columns, but 207 rows. So that means in Kazakhstan's history since 1990 or whenever, there have been 207 ministers across across the 13 or some odd ministries, right? So, okay. So now we've got, let's explore this just a little bit. So we can do that info. Yep, I need so here are the column names: ministry, term start date, term end date, position, name, birth date, URL or notes. And these have all been saved as object files, or sorry, object data types. So last week, do you remember when we talked about the the object data type, what that was? What's the object data type in Pandas?
That one that is basically combined.
Yeah. So in Pandas, let's actually look. I just want to do a quick ChatGPT on Pandas data types. If ChatGPT feels like it. So, well, I guess I'll just write here. Maybe I'm using too much. So basically, like in Python and Pandas. So in Python, you'll have int. In Pandas, you'll have int 64, something like this. You might have float. I think Pandas will have like float, maybe 64 or something like that. Python, you might have, Boolean. Pandas will also have, I think they call it Boolean. Python will have string. Pandas will call that an object. Okay. And then if you have a list, a dictionary, anything else, Pandas will also call that an object. Okay. So sometimes it's frustrating because you want to treat it like a string, but yeah, so this is kind of conversion of these are like Pandas native data types and Python's data types. So anyways, all of these things are treated like strings right now. So let's go to, okay, so the next thing we want to do is recode variables. Okay, so if we look at dat.columns, we've got the ministry, we've got the term start date, term end date, position, name, birth date. I'm not going to mess around with the URL and notes, right? That's just like a website or URL. I don't need that right now. Let's look at the ministry first. So here's the ministry. Okay. Quick question. So what is the data type of dat? Is what? No. So object is the data type of the data in the ministry column. Okay. But that itself, it's a data frame. So it's a Pandas core frame, data frame. So we say it's a data frame object, right? Inside of the Pandas library. The data type of is data frame, right? what is the data type of data.ministry? So this is a data type of a column in a pandas data frame. It's a series. Pandas core series, right? So the object is the data type of the data inside of the ministry series. Okay. So pandas treats this is important because when you're trying to apply functions in pandas, you need to be clear the functions and attributes of the data frame that are not the same as the functions and the attributes of the series, which is a column in dat. Okay. And this is where people run into trouble with pandas, because pandas differentiates between the data frame, which is like several series, right? Versus one column, whose data type is a series. So there are things that you can do with the data frame altogether. So for example, let's look at so let's see shape. So if you just do that dot, and let's see, here's a list of all the different stuff you can do with that. Okay. So if you click on, say, ministry, let's see, let's do that dot. And then you move your cursor down, you can see the name of the attribute on the left, and you can see the name of the data type on the right, right? So birth date is a series, ministry is a series, position is a series. These are all series, right? Then the box, the cube, apply map backfill. What is that? Those are functions.
Absolute.
What's that?
Absolute.
Yeah. But you can see on the left, see on the right side, it's DEF, ABS with the parentheses. That means that's a function that you can run on dat. Okay. So here's a list of, so when you put that dot, right, the AI here is giving you the list of all the different stuff that you could do to dat, right? Or that you could call after dat. So you can call the series, because it's a data frame. If you do dat dot and then the name of a column, it'll give you that column, which is called a series, right? Or you can do a function, or you can do, what's this blue thing? A property, right? Which in computer programming, we normally call an attribute, right? So data frames have three kinds of things attached to them. One is a series, which is the column in the data frame. The second thing are functions, which you can do to the data frame. The third are attributes of the data frame. So let me give you an example of each of these. So let's look at, yeah, it should just come up by itself, yeah. So yeah, so the attribute that I use the most is like shape. So if you look at shape and run up, right? Okay, so shape. So notice the difference between a property and a function is that there's no parentheses after this, right? It's an attribute. It doesn't need parentheses. It's not a function, and it doesn't accept parameters, right? So you can just do dot shape. You can also do, now what about, so what about the ministry though? Ministries. Oops. Okay, so this is a series. Now, if I do dot here, now notice the list of attributes and functions are different for the series than they are for the original data frame. Okay, so let's try. Can we do shape? Okay, so some things you can do. So if you do shape on a data frame, it gives you the number of columns and the number of rows, right? But if you do shape on a series, it only gives you the number of rows because a series is by definition a single column, right? But there are other things like dat info. Okay, so this is it's actually a function. So if you want to run dat info, you need parentheses, right? Now let's see, can we do dat info on a on a series? Okay, so it does it, but it says it's, yeah, and it's only going to give you that thing. So, okay, so this is what I want to say is that dat is a data frame. Dat dot column name is a series. Okay. One other way to call the series is you can either do dot or you can do dat like this, like that. Right? These are the same. Right, kind of like a dictionary, like a key value lookup, right, with the square brackets. This is also going to return the series, right? And this is actually useful. This construction with the square brackets and the quotes is actually more useful if you're rotating, if you're circulating through column names, right? And you want to use a column name as a variable, then you would use this, right? Because here you can't. You have to specify the actual column name itself, right? But here you can put in a variable here. And so you could run through different column names. But in any case, this is the same thing. Right. It's also the series. So these are just two ways of calling the same thing. Okay. So pardon me. Okay, so let's go down and look at let's look at the I want to recode the ministry. Why do I want to recode? Let's see, let's look at ministry. So I can look at the whole thing, right? Or it'll give me, kind of a summary view. It's an object. Here, again, the data type here, object, is not the object of dat.ministry. It's the data type of the data inside of that, of each row of data in that series, right? You can also run unique, or is it a function? Yeah. So if you run unique, this gives you a unique list of all of the values, right? So you don't need to look at the whole thing, but I want the unique list. Okay. The problem is for me, like if I'm going to use the names of the ministries for like a graph or a table, these names are really long, right? So the first thing I want to do is just kind of shorten these names. So I'm going to make a dictionary which takes the original name and then replaces it with a shorter name. Okay. So, but the way I'm going to do this is in an Excel file. So this is me kind of constructing a dictionary manually. Let's see. So if I have the string here, and then what I'll just call this labor, trade, education, culture, tourism, environment, resources, or what, natural resources maybe, ecology, industry, transport, justice, foreign affairs, digital development, internal affairs, defense, and agriculture. So these are just kind of shorter titles, right? Okay. Oh, actually, these got combined together. No. I should have done it in Notepad first, sorry. I'm gonna get rid of this and finance. Okay, I'm just gonna split them on the comma here. All right. So there are like all different kinds of ways that you could do this. You could do them like one by one. I just prefer to make a dictionary, and I think it's a little bit easier. But you know. So what, again, this like transport and communication, like these are this like these ministries changed over time. This may not be the most efficient way, but there's kind of a trick I want to show you that makes it like a little bit easier. Okay, so there's my list of, and they all have a comma after them, right? Okay, so labor, trade, finance. Let me move these down. Finance, economy. Okay, education, culture, tourism, ecology, environmental protection. Okay, natural resources, ecology, emergency, industry, transport, and comm. Okay, justice, foreign affairs, energy, digital development, healthcare, internal affairs, defense, agriculture. Okay, so, but now if I want this to be a dictionary, it has to be formatted in a very particular way, right? So the dictionary has to be like curly brackets, key, colon, value, comma, right? So here, actually, I want to remove all the commas. So I'm just going to find the comma and replace it with nothing. Oops, did I do it? Okay, so I got rid of all the commas, right? Okay, now, okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do equals. I need that curly Q. Oh, I'll do that at the end. So this has to be this value. And then what do I need? Whoops, that should have a comma after it. You got rid of that. Okay, does it have any commas? Okay, so it needs to be this value, and then what has to be after that string for a dictionary? You got a key and a value. What's between the key and the value? So I need the colon, right? So I'm gonna do an ampersand and put a colon in there, string. So now it's the first one, then the colon, and then, but then the next one, labor, right? That has to be in quotes because it has to be a string in Python, right? So I'm gonna do quote and end quote, and then and this, and then I need another quote on the end of it. And then at the end of all that, I need a comma, right? D3 and right. So if you format the string properly, now you've got the quote, single quote, oops, for the original value, then the colon, then the new value with quotes around it, right? So, or another way to do it is just if you want to put a quote here, right? No, I won't do it. Okay, so now if you just drag that all the way down, right? So that's my dictionary. So I'm going to copy and paste that back in the Python code. So I'm going to create a dictionary. It's going to be called ministry dictionary equals. Maybe I'll save these as a values. So these are all strings. Okay, so there's my dictionary, and then the dictionary has to have the curly Q at the beginning and the end, right? So I'll just put in the here at the beginning and one at the end. Okay, so now I've got a dictionary. Right, that has the original name and then the name that I want. Now, like another way to do this would have just been to go back through these files one by one and change the value in the column, right? So you could have done that manually. You could open up the Ministry of Agriculture and just like change it, right? And then you could reconcatenate them. You could have changed it manually there. The reason I'm doing it, it's probably a bit more complicated this way is just to show you, like, what if you have 1,000 files and you can't go back one by one and do it, right? So in this case, you can do the dictionary. So now I've got ministry. So I want to replace this name with the original name with the value, right, of the shortened one. So how am I going to do that? Okay, so this is one of the right, because if you use the dictionary like itself, and then you put in, say this value, right? It's going to return the value. I mean, if you put in the key, it's going to return the value. The problem is, how can you do that row by row within a data frame? Okay, so there are a lot of functions that you want to do row by row, value by value. So the way that you do that in pandas is with the apply function. So you can do dat.apply, and then you can apply a function row by row. So if you use so the syntax here is apply function and then lambda x. Okay, so what this is doing is it's taking, you're applying a function. The function is going to start with x, where x is each row. So you're going to, whatever comes after this colon, you're going to do to x, row by row by row, okay? As opposed to doing it to the whole data frame at the same time. So x is a row here. So now in the row, where's my... Okay, so so let's say I have this first row, then which column do I want to manipulate? So I'm trying to change the ministry name, right? So here, when I get a row, so with X, so lambda X colon, and now I can specify X with the square bracket, and I can put in the name of the column that I want, right? So I want ministry, right? One other thing you have to do here is axis equals 1, because when you're applying, when you apply a function to a data frame, you can either apply the function to the columns or you can apply the function to the rows, right? And so here, axis equals 0 would be, so it could either be axis equals 0 or axis equals 1. If it's axis equals 0, that means you're applying a function to the columns, which is not what I want to do, right? I want to apply a function row by row. So that's why you have to put axis equals 1 at the end here. And if I just do this, I'm just saying, for each row, give me back the ministry, right? So this is basically just going to give me the value in each row, right? But what do I want to do with this ministry value? I want to replace it with the value in the dictionary, right? So I'm going to take the dictionary, ministry dictionary. I'm going to put that in here. And then like this. So what I'm saying is for each row, take the value of the ministry in the ministry column and enter that into the ministry dictionary as the key, right? And then pop out the value. So if I run this, where's ecology and natural resources? Did we not find that? Let me make sure. Ecology, geology, and natural resources. Ecology. Oh, comma. Oh, okay. Because it had a comma in it and I got rid of all the commas. Okay, so this should have a comma there. Okay, so if I go back. So this one has to have a comma. Okay. Okay. So now I've replaced, right? So it takes the value of the ministry in the ministry row and it puts that into the dictionary. And now it's going to pop out the value of the dictionary, which is labor, agriculture, right? And now I'm going to save this column over the top of ministry, right? Or I could save it as a new column, but I want to save it over the top of ministry. So I'm going to say that ministry equals, okay. And now if I look at that ministry, right now it's my simplified labels. And I can double check, you know, just by using that dot unique, right? And here are the new labels for my ministry, right? So this is one way to recode, right? It's, I mean, you can recode value by value, right? But using a dictionary where the original values are the keys, and then you specify the values, right? And then you use this apply function, and you put in the row in the value and let the dictionary pop out the new value. And you do that for every row, right? And then so this is a bit more complicated one, right? They won't all be this complicated, but I wanted an example that shows you how to use the apply function, right? So the next example is also going to show you how to use an apply function, but not with a dictionary, but in a different way. So let's look at the next term start date. So let's look at term, we want to. Okay. So this is a pretty common issue. You know, you can see like 2023.0, here's like 5.2016, right? So in some cases, like she put the month before the year, sometimes she put the month after the year, sometimes it's like a date time, like a date stamp, right? This is a mess, right? Fortunately, there aren't that many values, but sometimes there's like a dot, right? Okay, so first thing I want to do is get rid of these like date time objects and convert them into strings. So first thing I'm going to do is take, if you have a field, you can convert okay. So if you can use this as type function, as type works on a series, right? So right now I have an object. Some of these objects are strings. So some of these objects are floats. See, these don't have quotes around them, right? So those are actually like decimals. Those are floats. Some of these are strings. Some of these are like date time stamp, like date time objects, right? So like there are all kinds of there are like 3 different data types in this column, right? It's a total mess. So the first thing I'm going to do is convert them all to strings because I can manipulate strings a bit more easily. Right? So I do that by taking the series term start date, and then I'm going to force it to be as type str string. Now, and then look at that uniquely. Now, before this was a float, now it's a string, right? And before these were like date timestamps, and now they're strings. So at least everything is a string now, so I can manipulate them as strings. Okay. So okay, still a big mess, right? And in fact, I'm not going to try to parse out like month and year. What I'd like to do is just pull the year out of each of these. So how might we go about pulling the year out of all of these like differently formatted strings? Any thoughts? It's a total mess. And if you had 1,000 files, right, you're not going to go back and do this manually, right? So we're going to write a function to parse the year out of the string. And then we're going to put that function inside of this dat.apply. Okay. And we're going to call that parsing function and then apply that to each value in the column. Okay. So the first thing, so some of these have dots, some of these have dashes, right? And then there's also some of these have like these other time things after them. Okay. First thing I want to do, so I thought about this a little bit earlier today. So I'm gonna, if you were encountering this the first time, you might like mess around with it, do some trial and error. Like I want to speed it up a little bit. So the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of these like timestamps that come after the date, right? So firstly, so my function would be, so I'm going to parse year. And the thing that I would put in here will be like the, I'm just going to call it S, which is whatever my, year string is. Okay, so if there's a space in S, right? So where's a space? I only see spaces if I get this weird thing, right? With the time after. So if there's a space in S, then I want to split S on the space, and I want to grab the first part of it, right? Because these all have the same format, right? They're just like the thing with the dashes, and then there's a space, and then there's the part that I don't need, right? So if I split on the space, that's going to create a list with the first part, comma, the second part, and I don't need the second part. I only need the first part, right? So if it has a space in it, I'm gonna just grab this first part, okay? And I'm gonna write that over it, okay? So that handles all of this weird stuff, right? And now all that I'm left, so let's just try that and return S. Okay, so that's the function. And now I'm gonna go back up here. I'm gonna take this. So I'm dat.apply lambda x, and instead of ministry, I'm gonna do parse year as a function. So it has to be the round brackets. X, which column am I going to apply this function to? Term start date, right? So term start date is what's giving me all this garbage. So term start date. So dat apply for each row, run the parse year function on that string, right? Float, or it's not float. Let's make sure it's not a float. Where? Float is not iterable. I thought all these are. Okay. The problem here is I generated as type string here, but if you look at if you go back and look at this, it didn't save it as a string, right? So I need to actually oops. I need to save it over as a string. Okay. So now if okay, so now there's strings. Okay, now it should be fun. So there's okay. So let's look at these uniquely. Okay. So that got rid of the 0.00 stuff, right? So now I've got like these different strings with some of them have dots, some of them have more than one, month and day, some of them have like dashes, right? What is true of all of the year values? They have 4 digits, right? So no matter how it's formatted, whether they have dots or dashes or 2 or 3 or whatever, right? They've got 4 digits. So what I'm gonna do is if they have dots, I'm gonna split them on dots, right? If they've got dashes, I'm gonna split them on dashes. And whenever you split something, what does it give you back? You know what? a list, right? And then I can do a list comprehension or list construction and just grab the item from that list that has length of 4, right? So basically I'm going to split these things up, go through and grab whatever is 4 digits long, right? And that's the year. So let me just add that to my function. So if there's a dot in S, then S equals then it's going to be a S list equals S dot split on the dot, right? So that's going to give me a list. Now I'm going to put that in a list comprehension. So this is a little bit sneaky, right? But I'm going to put it in a list constructor. The value for value in that if the length of V is 4, right? And I'm going to do that if it's a dot. I'm going to do that if it's a dash. Okay, so what does that give us? Oh, hold on a second. So let's do if, elif, and so if it doesn't have a dash or it doesn't have a dot, then I'm just going to say, hey, give me back S list equals S, but I'm going to put S in a list so that everything is a list. Where hashable type. Where is my function? I did this earlier. I'm just going to take my function from earlier. Okay, so if there's a dot, then New Year is going to be split it, and for year and New Year, keep it only if it's 4, and if it's and if it's a dash, do it if it's a dash, and if it's where is my hashable type here? Or I did this before. Okay, there we go. So it's got all the, so the only thing in this list is anything that's like 4, right? And now I just need to delist it. So let's make it a, let me look. Do I have any but I think the problem is that some of these might actually be empty. So if you go back up in here and look, are there any values here that that don't have years? It looks like they all do. Okay, so here if oh yeah, I want to print this out. Okay, so I just printed it out as it's running, and you can see that these are all years here, but there are a few of them that are null, right? And so this is another issue. A reason why I want to bring this particular example up is because I want to ultimately I want to convert this to an integer, right? But first of all, I need to take it out of the list, and also these ones that are null, like I need to handle these somehow, right? So so what I'm going to do here is if new year here is, so this is a list with one item in it, right? So if the length of the list is greater than 0, then I'm just going to grab the first item in that list, which is that number, which is that string, right? But if it's not, right, if the length of this string is not greater than 0, then that means it's a null list with nothing in it, right? And so in that case, I'll define new year as a np.nan. So do we know what np? Do we know nan? You know this one? Okay, so np here at the top, you got to add import. This is actually numpy, right? So numpy is like the scientific, like scientific numbers library. So I just import numpy as np, and then the numpy library has a nan object, which is a null, like a nan value. So you can assign so if this list is empty, right? So the length of that list is not greater than 0, then I'm going to assign that to be np.nan. Okay. So I'm assigning that as a null value. Okay, so let's run that. Oh, I had to forget to run it. Okay, so now it's still an object though. Why is it an object? Because I still have some nulls in there. So there's a if we want to handle this variable, we also want to convert it. So the issue is if you want to take, let's see, that term start date. Normally I would just do as type int, right? But it's not going to do that because you have some null values in here. Oh, sorry, I forgot to say, I want to save this over the top. So we haven't actually saved it yet. So let's do that terms start date. I don't need to print this anymore. Okay, now term start date is this. Okay, so can I change it? So I can't convert it to an integer. Why can't I convert it to an integer? Because there's those missing values, right? What if I try to use the int 64, which is the okay. So if you do the int 64, this is the pandas version of int, it can handle it, right? So like the lowercase int is the Python raw data type of integer, but the capital int 64 is pandas version of int, which is more sophisticated, so it can handle these values, right? So now if I look at if I save as that, oops. Okay. Now if I look at this, right, now the data type is int64, right? So these were like super messy, right? So what we've done today is we showed you how to recode using a dictionary, right? This is kind of like qualitative or kind of categorical recoding using a dictionary. I've also shown you how to do recoding using a function, right? Where you would parse like string, you would parse like a number out of a string using split or whatever. So, and again, the idea here is that whether you're creating a dictionary or a function, in the end, you're using this dat.apply lambda x, which allows you to take each row at a time, right? And then do whatever you're going to do to it, whether it's a function or a dictionary or something, and return that. And then the key thing is once you, so normally what I will do is I'll run this like that apply thing here. I'll keep running it until I get the function right. Because this is not saving it to anything. It's just printing it and then it's deleting it, right? So you just keep doing it until you get what you want. And then when you finally get what you want, then you save it, right? Then you write over the original one, or you can write it as a new column, right? So, so we covered these two functions today. I think I'll upload this full script tonight, which I basically just applied the same thing to term end date. We look at position. We can do position real fast. Let's do position. This will take a minute. So this one's easy. So if I look at that position unique. So in some cases, she wrote minister, but with a space afterwards, right? In some cases, she wrote minister of enlightenment, minister of science, minister, ministry, chairman, committee chairman, et cetera, right? These are all ministers. So I just want the position to be minister for everything. Okay. So in that case, I mean, if you look at, right, I mean, these all look like minister, but some of them have these things in there. So what you could do, if you just want to rewrite the entire column as rewrite it, you can just write like that, right? So you can assign a value. It could be like true, you know, the series you're setting the whole series equal to true or 1 or the year 2025 or minister or whatever. And if you do that, it'll just rewrite over it. Right. So now there's only one value in that column and it's all minister. Okay. Next time, one other one that we want to do is the birth date. Next time, what we're going to do is calculate. So if you have the term of the start date when the person became the minister and you have their birth date at the time they became minister, now we can subtract the birth date from the start or right. And then you can calculate their age at the time they became minister, right? So then we could calculate like what's the average, what's the age of the minister, and then we can look, you know, next week we'll look at, you know, what's the average ages of the ministers over time, you know, are the ministers getting older or younger, right? Or we can also look at the, if we're aggregating, we can also look at, you know, which ministries on average have younger ministers versus older ministers, right? So these are kind of aggregate functions and things that we can look at, that we'll look at next week. And we'll also do the joins. So, okay. Yeah. Coding and recoding is like one of the most tedious, right? One of the tedious things you're going to be doing is like coding and recoding and getting your data like exactly the way you need it so you can go and do analysis, right? And the other part is actually reshaping the data. So again, like I said, next week we'll talk about reshaping, aggregating, joining to reshape the data into the shape that you want it. So, okay, perfect, great. I'll stop here.